covering her shame, and she is begging him not to do this. Just go to Dad. He can arrange this. We can get married. We can do this the right way. Howbeit, verse 14, he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her. This is a very interesting verse here, 15. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. And Amnon said unto her, Arise, go home. And she said unto him, There is no cause. This evil in sending me away is greater than the other that thou didst unto me. But he would not hearken unto her. Then he called his servant that ministered unto him, and said, Put now this woman out from me, and bolt the door. What's interesting here is that after Amnon had his way with Tamar, he was repulsed by her. He hated her more than he had been smitten by her just a few moments before he committed this rape. His love for her immediately turned to loathing and contempt. This is a common, albeit warped, and I do mean warped, psychological response. A person who commits an atrocious or heinous act against another person will oftentimes develop an unfounded hatred towards their victim in an attempt to soothe their own guilty conscience. And more often than not, this is important to listen to, the victim has no power to change that. I bring this point up specifically because I know for a fact, and personally speaking, of relationships within families who brother or sister has been victimized by another brother or sister, or even a mom and dad. And that person that has been victimized will do every single thing that they can to make that situation right. But you know what? They cannot change the victim, the person who perpetrated the crime. They cannot change the way that person feels. And I know that there are people hurting and people that struggle with that every single day, and you cannot continue to do that. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. I don't believe it's wrong to recognize that some relationships are not salvageable. I don't believe that that's wrong at all. Removing ourselves from those relationships does not make us a bad person. In fact, had Absalom been able to remove himself from that toxic situation, because what happens if you read the rest of this story, tragedy after tragedy. Absalom exacts revenge. Tamar, his full sister, comes to him, and he's very cold and calculating. He's mad. And David, his father, finds out what happened, and David's mad, but David doesn't do anything about it. So instead, Absalom takes his revenge out on his brother. He plots to have him killed, which is what happens. And then he turns against his own father, and he starts a war against his own father. And in the end, Absalom is killed. And David is left with the pieces of his family that have just completely fallen all around him. The family is shattered. And David cries, "O Absalom, O Absalom." He wanted to take his place. Absalom could have changed the whole dynamic had he chosen to just rise above an unsalvageable relationship. He could have done that, but he didn't. Separating yourself from an evil or toxic relationship is not to be confused with an unforgiving attitude. Did y'all get that? We have the ability to forgive a person, a father, a mother, a brother, or sister, and at the same time distance ourselves from their corrupt ways. Understand what's at stake here. some relationships can be anchors. We must be wise enough to realize that we and we alone hold the keys to those shackles. You know, I think about families that have been destroyed, and an analogy, if I'm going to use an analogy here, it reminds me of a person who's swimming in an ocean. And they have a chain around their ankle. They have the key in one hand as they're taking the strokes. And that chain, at the end of it, is an anchor. And no matter how hard they try to stay on top of the water, it continues to pull them down. And the only reason that they want to hold on and keep swimming is because they feel like they can't sever that relationship, because you know what? It would be wrong. I need to be able to forgive that person, and everything will be okay, and we'll get along. That's not life. That's not keeping it real, because sometimes that just doesn't happen. And the problem comes in. The longer you try, that anchor will continue, eventually it'll pull you down into the water as well. So keep in mind, I am not in any way suggesting that you cannot forgive the person. You can forgive the person and rise above and move on. It is perfectly acceptable to separate yourself from toxic and evil relationships. 1 Thessalonians 5:22 says, avoid every kind of evil. You all have heard the saying, one bad apple spoils the bunch. You stay in relationships that are like that are toxic. You're going to drive a wedge between yourself and your own spiritual walk. It's really hard to go closer to God when you have constant toxicity in your own family dynamics. The question is, are you allowing your shackles to stay shackled? Are they still around you? And you feel like, you can't move on. The question is, what do you need to do in order to release yourself from those relationships, to rise above? Very, very difficult stuff going on in my wife's family. And try as she might, she can't make her brothers love her. As many times as she goes to them pleading, let's fix this, let's get it right, she can't do it. And if she continues to just dwell on these things, it eventually will bring her down. And I thank God every day that I'm married to a strong woman who is able to realize that, and despite the hurt and pain, rise above it. Because she knows what's more important. Staying shackled to a toxic environment, or letting that go, forgiving them, praying for them, and moving on with her life. I hope that this lesson has been one of encouragement to you. If you're in a situation that has those toxic relationships, and let's be real, there's not a whole lot of us that don't have those kind of relationships. My encouragement to you is to let those things go. The invitation is extended to you. If you need help, if you need to talk to the eldership here, if you need help in transitioning into a forgiving attitude, we're here to help you. If you've been reading, you've been studying the Bible, you feel like this is a time that you need to dedicate your life to Christ in baptism, this is also an excellent time to do that. So we offer this invitation to you. If you have any need at all, if you need our prayers or just simply some encouragement, you can make your way to the front as we stand and sing.